So, this episode of Tombo Talks, Matt Kilkelly asked basically what my 9/11 story was. It took me about 3 weeks going back and forth. I had a very long list of reasons to do this video and an even longer list of reasons to not do the video. And I was kind of mixed as to whether or not I do it, whether or not I should do it. Um, Being now that that's what, just about 22 years in the past. Um, Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, I was 19 years old. I was fresh out of high school. I was in my first semester at community college, local community college. And Tuesdays and Thursdays that semester were late days. My first class wasn't until like 10:30, 10:20, 10:30, something like that. So I never really watched TV. I was getting ready. So I was surprised that I bothered to turn the TV on, and the TV in my bedroom was set for CNN. There was a Chrysler Sebring commercial. The screen went to black, 30, 45, 60 seconds worth. And then you saw that famous shot, CNN studios southbound looking at lower Manhattan, and the building to the Twin Tower to the right, the North Tower, the one with the antenna, had smoke pouring out of it. And of course, they're, calling people, trying to talk to people on the ground, trying to get information about the story as it's happening. And then with tens of millions of people who watched throughout Europe, throughout the eastern coast of the United States, watched it happen live as, United 175 slammed into the south face of the South Tower. I wasn't home. I'd gone to class, I'd gone to campus. So I didn't see the South Tower collapse. I didn't see the Pentagon, the aftermath of what happened at the Pentagon. Um, I'd gotten to campus. I went into the main building where my class and the cafeteria was, the College Center building, the biggest building on campus. As I got to the stairway, there was an announcement on the PA system. Attention, faculty, staff, students, in view of the terrorist attacks in New York City and Washington, D.C., effective immediately, we're canceling all classes. Campus will remain open if you want to, stay with, on campus, for community. Part of the, grieving process, you are allowed to stay on campus. But all the classes were canceled. And as I was turning the corner listening to this, I'd seen a cousin of mine who was on my paternal grandmother's side of the family, who we sort of kind of recognized, knew by name. He confirmed, and then as you were standing there, CNN's covering everything that's happening. I was pretty much the part time job I had called. There was a bomb threat, so I spent the rest of the day at home watching as they were doing the coverage. I think it was maybe 10:30 in the morning. It was very early on where they started throwing around Osama bin Laden's name. I don't think they mentioned Al Qaeda until the afternoon. Then they started, the FBI was building a case and they were leaking information, or the media was getting hold of information about what was going on. One of the one of the most instrumental parts of what happened on 9/11 was there was a reporter, a cameraman that after the second, between the collapse of the South Tower and the North Tower, there was a guy with a camera who got in and he knew he wasn't supposed to be there, so he was running around frantically just trying to capture as much of. And it had a very movie-like quality. You're not used to seeing that in real life. That's typically something you know on a movie. It didn't look real. It didn't seem real. But without saying any word, you just got a sense of the that hole. Obviously there was a 70-foot deep, 16-acre hole in Lower Manhattan, New York City, the region, but there was that hole in terms of being America's first domestic terrorist attack. that fresh, the freshness of that wound, the very personal nature of that wound. Um, and it was a way of conveying something without saying anything that I found captivating. That's probably the one thing, you know. If there was any positivity to take away from that day, it would be the power of those images. Um, that they were able to tell a tale without saying anything. Um, if you'll remember, depending on what you've watched in the past, there was a movie called The World Trade Center, or World Trade Center, I believe. Nicolas Cage and a long laundry list of famous American actors and actresses, well-known people were starring in it. And the very end of the movie, they don't have an epilogue. They don't have a total tally of the victims. They don't talk about the attacks. It's just these shots, this video of whether it was a subway train or a path train. It was empty. Staten Island Ferry, a very large vessel, empty. There was a newspaper blowing around in the breeze. Just showing you the massive emptiness. Again, another instance of video speaking without any narration or voiceover to give you walk into that kind of knowing the events already, and the video speaks to you without any actual voice. And that's always kind of fascinated me, the power of video and photography. But that was probably because I was 19 at the time, and like a lot of 19-year-olds, I was very unsure. What was I going to do? What did I like? What was I willing to do professionally versus avocationally? What was I willing? Were my interests and all that? I was still kind of very much at 19, like a lot of people, still trying to figure out where I fit in that, and sort of where I was versus where I wanted to be, and how do I get there. And so that was a very prominent expression, prominent message that I got. Um, there was a lot of, at least from what I saw personally, there was a lot of people taking the time to be a little nicer on Wednesday, September 12th, than they were, before the attacks. Um, One of the things that's not heavily covered, but it was very prominent at the time, was the mass rush of Islamophobia. There was a very once it was discovered that the terrorists, the hijackers, were from Muslim nations, that they were Muslim men, there was a very sharp anti-Islamic or Islamophobic sentiment. Um, I think Ohio and Michigan, there was a lot of attacks on Muslims. Uh, Even in portions of the country where there are no Muslims, there was just a very strong distrust of anybody that was Muslim. So, like a lot of things that happened in history, there was a mixed bag in terms of some of the positivity that came from it, and a lot of that inherent negativity that came along with those events. Um, Whether by accident or by design, I didn't have any personal connection to the Twin Towers or any of the four flights or the Pentagon. I was fortunate enough in that to not have any kind of personal attachment to those events. Um, but being with the strong presence of media, everybody was trying to cover the New York mayor's election, which was that day, and then something of national significance happens, and of course all the cameras are rolling to capture that. So that was you are watching that happen live, and then with the speed of events, and as America was still in the process of waking up, it was 9 o'clock, a little after 9 o'clock on the East Coast, when everything started to go terribly, terribly wrong. So that would have been 6 o'clock on the West Coast. So a lot of America still wasn't even aware of just the gravity of what was going on, and you didn't really see, you weren't able to appreciate that if you weren't watching the TV. And as the day wore on, coverage kept reshooting, replaying those images, and whether it's for good or for bad, that those images of the planes hitting and of the towers collapsing and of the gaping hole in the Pentagon, those are all, which I suppose is great from a memorial sense, remembering what happened. But those images, those events, those sequences are seared into our memory. Um, I'm sure that there are some who argue psychologically that that's probably healthy as far as processing all that. You're so exposed to it, there's an oversaturation. It kind of gets easier to see with time, though there are those people. I went to Liberty State Park in Jersey City, New Jersey, and they have a empty sky 9/11 memorial devoted to the New Jerseyans who died September 11th. Walking to it, I was fine. Walking through it, I was fine. Shooting video, shooting photos, I was fine. Staring at lower Manhattan, I was fine. Getting long shots of the island of Manhattan, all those famous iconic skyscrapers, I was fine. Walking back to the park visitor's office and asking how long that walk was is when I decided that's when it hit, just the gravity of what you would have seen on September 11th if you stood where that memorial was. Um, the absolute shock and hopelessness is probably the one thing that sticks with you, and that was when talking to the guy at the park visitor center office was when I teared up. Um, I saw Ground Zero in 2003 after they cleaned it up. I made a promise to go back, especially now with the memorial. And either had the time and no money, or money and no time to do it. I'm hoping now, we're in March 2023, I'm hoping as we get to spring, summer, I'm hoping to avail the nice weather and take a chance to get out there and do photos and shoot some video. From what I see on YouTube, it looks like a very serene spot in a very busy city. I would love to see, in person what they've managed to accomplish there. So yeah, I mean, I wasn't in the five boroughs. I wasn't in New Jersey. I had no real attachment, but despite the fact I was 60 some miles west, 70 some miles, 60, 70 some miles west of New York City, that cable and the media were able to bring that very, very much into the home. It's been something that I think anybody who was alive that day, they say, my grandparents always say, oh, I remember where I was when Kennedy, the announcement of Kennedy getting shot. I remember where I was. My dad says he remembers hearing about Neil Armstrong walking on the moon. He remembers watching the coverage in school. It was one of those events. There's so much gravity to it that it just sucks you in, grabs your attention, and September 11th, 9/11 was, at least for me and for most of the people that I know who were alive during that, everybody's got that 9/11 story. If you were alive and conscious and sentient on September 11th, 2001, you've got a story about that. I'm not really sure what that contributes to pop culture, but it was requested. Finally decided to do it, so there it is. That was where I was September 11th, 2001.